Morning, folks. I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters in the Pathfinder School, back down here at the Pathfinder Outdoor Classroom. What I thought we'd do today is create a full seminar, a full-length seminar on water disinfection and how we can make potable water off the landscape. So there's a little bit of academic stuff we need to go through, and then we'll talk about the different ways of doing it, products that are currently for sale to accomplish that task, and how to use those products as well, and what I think the best ones are depending on your scenario. So let's first understand what problems we can have with water off the landscape that we need to address if we're going to ingest this water. Now, turbidity is not on this list because turbidity is basically junk in the water, dirt, rocks, sticks, debris, organic types of debris. But these things can have other things clinging to them. So getting rid of that stuff is important as well. But that is a very coarse filter will get rid of most of the turbidity in your water. Beyond that, what you have to think about is protozoa, bacteria, viruses, heavy metals, and chemicals. And truly speaking, there are very few things that will get rid of all of them. There are lots and lots of devices on the market that will take care of some of them, but there's really no device on the market that we can just carry in our backpack that's guaranteed 100% to take care of any problem in the water. That's just the way it is. If you read any filter, it will say 99.9% of, or 99.9% effective against, because they know that it's not 100% effective. Okay, the next thing we should talk about is we should talk about what these things are and what they do to our body and how we need to address them. Because most of them, at least the first three, most of them will work themselves out over time, but it's always good to seek medical attention when you get sick in case it's something more serious. So protozoa would be things like Cryptosporidium and Giardia, the things that make you vomit, the things that make you nauseous, the things that give you diarrhea. Bacterial infections like E. coli and Salmonella, again, same type symptoms, but a different life form, different type of problem. Again, most of them will work themselves out over time, but seeking medical attention when you're sick, always a good idea. Viruses, hepatitis A, norovirus, rotavirus, meningitis, most of those things, again, will work themselves out over time in your body. However, again, medical attention is always a good idea if you are sick, if you have the ability to get the medical attention. Metals, on the other hand, like lead and mercury, affect our bodies in different ways. The same thing with chemicals, whether that's agricultural pesticides, whether that's petroleum deposits, whether that's oil, whatever it may be that runs off into that waterway from agriculture or from manufacturing or from just an urban environment, those things can also cause problems in your water that you're not going to be able to address without some type of medical attention. Now, what we need to understand is how do we address these issues? What are the different ways and things that we can carry in our kit to address them and remove them from our water? And which ones are effective at doing what? Because there's a lot of misinformation on the internet without digging and digging and digging to find out what really works and what possibly does or does not work. So the first thing we should understand is we should talk, before we get into all the ways to disinfect our water or purify our water, and those are two different things that we need to talk about right away, okay? When we're talking about disinfecting water, we're talking about getting rid of the protozoa and the bacteria. You're not purifying water without getting rid of the viruses. And that still does not address the metals or the chemicals. Those have to be addressed further yet, all right? But the difference between filtering and purifying is the viruses. If we don't get rid of the viruses, we're only filtering. Now, there's lots of filters on the market today that people use every single day that are really only good for the protozoa and the bacteria. Filters like the Sawyer Squeeze, those are a microfiber, hollow fiber filter. They do not have activated carbon in them. They will not remove viruses. Will not. Will not remove metals, will not remove chemicals, will not. They're only going to take care of the protozoa and the bacteria. You have to have a carbon filter, activated carbon filter in that system to be able to address some of these other things, all right? So understanding that's important. The Grayl filter, on the other hand, which we'll talk about later, addresses all of these, all right? But let's understand what the CDC says first and talk about the different common forms of addressing our groundwater resources and what the CDC actually says is effective versus questionably effective versus not effective at all. All right, so leaving out the heavy metals and the chemicals for right now and only worrying about things like viruses, bacteria, and protozoa. This is from the CDC's website directly, okay? Common ways that we use to disinfect or purify groundwater resources are boiling. And again, just to reiterate on the boil real quick, if you're boiling to remove these things, then at normal elevation, less than 6,500 feet, when that water comes to a rolling boil, it's good. Above 6,500 feet, 3 minutes is the rule. The reason for that is water boils at a different temperature at higher elevation, and contact time beyond pasteurization of 145 degrees is what it takes to kill those organisms. So, boiling will take care of bacteria, viruses, cryptosporidium, and giardia. And these are separated under protozoa because everything's not effective against both. We need to understand that, okay? So boiling is always going to be a very preferred method if you have the time to do it and if you have the resources to do it. Which is the reason at the basic class we always teach boiling water, okay? Filtration, and when I say filtration, we're talking about a hollow fiber type filter, like the Sawyer or the platypus type filter. That's hollow fiber, not carbon, all right? Good on bacteria, definitely no good on viruses, all right? Good on both cryptosporidium and giardia. As long as you're down to 0.5 microns or less with that filter, you're gonna be good on both. Now, purifying or purifiers, which are carbon-based filters, like the Grayl, bacteria, viruses, both types of protozoa, cryptosporidium, and giardia. Good to go, no problem, all right? Regular chlorine bleach, all right? Good on bacteria and viruses, but no good for cryptosporidium. Questionable effects on giardia. Think about that before you decide to carry bleach. Iodine, 2% tincture of iodine, another very popular way that backpackers have always purified or disinfected, their water, all right? Again, good on bacteria, good on viruses, no good at all for cryptosporidium, questionable on giardia. And really, as far as things that make you sick in the wild, probably the most common things in the U.S. are going to be giardia, all right, beaver fever. That's a very common problem in waterways in the U.S. Chlorine dioxide, all right? Chlorine dioxide is a completely different animal. It usually comes in tablets. You put it in your water, 1 tab per U.S. quarter liter. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Aqumira makes a very good one. Polar Pure, same thing. It's 2 tablets, I believe, but it's also chlorine dioxide. Again, good on bacteria, good on viruses, questionable on cryptosporidium, good on giardia. UV type purification. All right, UV works by attacking those organisms with UV light. I'm going to show you a UV type device, like a SteriPen, that you can use in your water. 90 seconds of on time or contact time with the water for 1 liter, okay? Again, all 4, okay? Good for all 4 of those. So when we're talking about the effectiveness of things that we want to use and what we want to carry, we need to think about what these possibilities are in our water before we just decide to carry a certain filter. Again, if you're worried about cryptosporidium and giardia, which are some of the main problems that you encounter in U.S. waters, then chlorine and iodine are not your friend. They're not, okay? And chlorine dioxide might not be your friend. What you're going to need is you're going to need at least a filter if you're not going to boil. And again, That's where the Sawyer falls into play. Lots and lots of thru hikers carry the Sawyer squeeze. It will take care of everything but viruses. So if you're worried about viral infections in the water, you better go a step beyond that. All right? Purifiers like the Grayl, again, will take care of all of that. So purifiers are going to be right there with boiling. The same thing with UV. All right? Those are your three best bets. Boil, purifiers, or UV light. Those are going to be the top three. Now, if I'm looking at those three things, in my mind, I'm going to boil whenever I can to conserve my resources. We talk about that in the basic class. It's always, that's your first choice, is to boil if you can. But there are going to be times that you can't boil. You don't either have the time, you don't have the resources, you don't have the ability to boil water, you can't start a fire, something like that because of weather conditions. Could be multiple reasons you cannot start a fire. Maybe there's a fire ban, all right? In that case, your only two choices are going to be a purifier of some kind, like a Grayl, or UV light. 2 is 1, 1 is none, 3 is better. Probably going to have both of those in my kit, along with the boil scenario, if I'm worried about viruses. If I'm not worried about the viruses, then a filter like the Sawyer Squeeze is a great option. So these are things that we need to understand and clarify for ourselves before we choose what method we're going to use for disinfection or purification of our groundwater resources that we're going to consume. Okay. When we look at filtration systems, they're always measured in microns. So let's understand what that means, okay? A micron is 1/1000th of a millimeter, is 1 micron. If your filter is 0.5 microns, so half of a micron, it will take care of protozoa and some chemicals. Most of the filters on the market that are fiber type filters, hollow fiber filters, are 0.01 to 0.02 microns, and they'll take care of all the bacteria as well as the protozoa, which we talked about. To get viruses out of the water, you need 0.005 microns. You can only get that from a carbon filter, all right? The same thing with chemicals and metals. You're not going to remove those things from the water without a charcoal, activated charcoal, carbon style filter. So understanding that is important, because a lot of filters on the market today that are commonly used are hollow fiber filters. They're not carbon filters. So we need to understand the difference. We also need to understand what micron level it takes to remove these things, so that we make better decisions when we buy things that we're going to use to disinfect our water. But remember that none of this takes into account the UV light. UV is never going to remove the chemicals or the metals, but it kills everything. So if that's all you're worried about, you're not worried about agricultural runoff, petroleum products, things like that in your water, chlorine, fluorides, that type of stuff, you're not worried about any of that stuff in your water, then UV is a good way to go, because it'll take care of those top 4 immediately. 90 seconds per liter. Very, very simple. The Grayl will remove all of that stuff. The difference is the weight and the volume. You get 24, 26 ounces with one push. Doesn't take long to do it. You just get a little bit lower volume of water, and you have to carry more weight to carry that type of filter, or that type of purifier, I should say, with you. So again, I'm just kind of steering you guys in directions so that you understand what we're talking about. That's why I keep mentioning some of these other things, because while a SteriPen looks really, really good from a top 4 standpoint, it does nothing for metals. It does nothing for chemicals. The Grayl, on the other hand, while it has a lesser lifespan compared to something like the Sawyer, will take care of metals, will take care of a lot of chemicals and metals in the water. So there's a big difference there, okay? When it comes to things like the hollow fiber filters, like your platypus type filters and your Sawyer Squeeze type filters, those things are not going to take care of any viruses on top of the chemicals and the metals in the water. So understanding this is important. Okay, so out collecting water today. Let's look at some of these devices for filtering and disinfecting our water, purifying our water. You can see this is a wetland area here. And this is definitely would not be my first choice of a place to collect water. However, if this is all you got, this is all you got. Now, this is the place where the Grayl really shines, in my opinion, because it's quick and dirty, and it takes out smell and taste. So if you've got sulfur water or skanky water, or you're worried about the way that water is going to taste because it's dark tannin colored from the leaves, things like that, you don't want your water to taste like tea, the Grayl is a winner right there. There's not a lot of turbidity in this water at the surface because it's not flowing. So if I'm careful the way I collect this with the Grayl, I can immediately make drinkable water. Now, with this Grayl, it's as simple as removing the outer container, because the inner container is where your clean water is going to be, but nothing's ever going to touch, all right? I'll set this filter aside, and I'm just going to get as close to this water source as I can and collect from the top, just like this, so that very little sediment can get in that water. And then I'm just going to set this bad boy down right here. Insert the filter on the top just like this. Crack the lid so that it can breathe. And push it down with my hands. If it feels like it's taking more force than it should, then it's probably that you haven't cracked the lid enough. All right, it doesn't take long to get that thing to the bottom. And now, that brown nasty water is going to be completely clean. And I have no problem drinking it right out of that jug. No taste whatsoever to it. Tastes like bottled water at that point. So the Grayl is a good system. Number one, because it takes care of viruses as well. Removes some chemicals and heavy metals. Takes care of the pathogens and the bacteria. But it's heavy, right? You're talking about some weight to carry this. So for me, this is a day pack type item. Something where I may run out of water on the trail and I may want more. Hunting scenario. I'm out scouting an area, hunting for deer, something like that. Hunting during squirrel season, mushroom hunting, any of those types of things where I'm walking the woods and I may run out of water and want some more. Any water source that I can find, this bad boy is going to give me 24 ounces of clean water almost immediately that I can drink. Now, everybody knows I'm a Grayl fan, so it's good for me to talk about downfalls as well. The downfalls of something like a Grayl system are, number one, the weight. And even the titanium one is not that much different in weight as far as the full-size titanium than the GeoPress itself. Even with the nesting cup attached, the stainless steel Pathfinder nesting cup that goes with this, the difference is about 5 or 6 ounces in weight differential between the titanium and the older model. Now, besides weight, the only difference is, or the only problem I would say you have, or may have, and again, short term, it's not going to matter. It's good for, about 350 pushes, basically, or until it starts to get to where it's hard to push the pump down. It is susceptible to debris and things like that, but that's where things like Milbank bags come into, and we've talked about those in other videos. We'll talk about them more in a minute, because I wouldn't want to use a system like this or rely on it for very long without a Milbank bag. For collecting surface water like this that there's no turbidity in, you can get it right off the surface and it's good and clean, then the Milbank bag is not necessary. But if you're in a stream that's running or the water's turbid or you're getting runoff, things like that, that makes the water murky, you're going to want the Milbank bag before you press it through this filter or any other filter for that matter, really. That is a carbon-based filter that you can clog up very easily. All right, so here we've got a bit of a stream running, and it's got some flow to it right now. A lot of that's going to be runoff, no question about that. But there's some deeper holes in here that we can get water out of without getting too much grit in it. This is a good place for collecting water with something like the Sawyer squeeze, where you're going to use an excess bag or an outside bag exteriorly to squeeze your water through that filter. Again, remember, this is again a fiber filter, so you're only talking about some things getting filtered out with this, but the major protozoa and things like that and the bacteria, they're going to be gone. All right, so for me, one of the major downfalls of the Sawyer squeeze is this bag. If you're going to collect water in a little bitty hole like this, you're going to be there for a while. There is a cure to that problem, and it's called the knock bag. Okay, so with this knock bag, what you do is you remove this clip off the top, and it gives you a wide mouth opening at the top of the bag, so that now instead of having that little bitty opening to dip inside there, you have a large opening you can dip in and collect water into. So that's what we're going to use for this demo. Now we can collect quite a bit of water out of something that large or that deep of a pool without compromising ourselves and having too much turbidity in the water. And if we get lucky like that and find a pool, then we can forego things like pre-filtering that water at all with something like a Milbank bag, and we can use this. Now we'll connect our filter to this and filter this water. Okay, now that we have this knock bag full, we have a couple choices with this Sawyer squeeze style filter. The first thing we can do is we can just hook the filter to the bottom and squeeze the bag, which is why it's called the Sawyer squeeze, directly into whatever our container is. Now I brought a fairly clear Nalgene bottle here, brand new one, so you guys can see what the flow looks like coming out of this under pressure versus what the flow looks like if you're just hanging it to filter your water by gravity. So the first thing we'll do is we'll try to press filter some water through here. And all we're going to do is we're going to turn the bag upside down, and we're going to open up the top just like this. And we're going to screw our filter into that. And I've got a cap on this filter to restrict the flow. And now I can hang it back the right way, get my bottle, open it up, and squeeze water straight into the bottle. As you can see, squeezing that thing gets you better flow. If you're just hanging it, you're going to get that. But it doesn't take long, even from a suspended position like this, without even forcing it, to get 32 ounces of water through this filter. It's a pretty good system. It is susceptible to clogging and needing to be back flushed, which we'll talk about as well. All right, cap that dude off real quick. And now we're good. Like I said, we could drink directly from the bottle just by popping that cap and drinking. Now again, pros and cons, right? One of the things I'm not a fan of with these bags, and I use it a lot, so I'm a fan, but you're going to have to dry this out. Obviously, just a closed membrane in a bag, that's a bacteria trap, just like a water bladder is on your back. If you don't clean it out properly, it's going to grow bacteria. The good thing about this is it's easy just to open up that wide mouth. You can almost put this thing in there sideways to open it up, hang it upside down, and let it dry out in your camp at night or something like that when you're done using it. It's not going to grow bacteria immediately, but it's not something you want to leave wet for a long period of time either. So that is one downfall to a bag like this. Now, all right, so one of the other cons with these filters is they are susceptible to debris. Now you can filter some of that debris out with a Milbank bag if you chose to do that, but that's kind of a long drawn out process to filter your water. If you're in an area where you can get fairly clear water sources, this is a great filter to have with a knock bag, but you still need to back flush it every now and then. To do that, it comes with a syringe. You just suck up water into it, and I've sucked clean water into this from what we just got done doing. And I've taken the front end off, and I'm just going to force water through it backwards, just like that. And that back flushed the system. They recommend you do that if the flow slows down, or if you have stored this and you're getting ready to use it again. After storage, you should back flush it before using it. Now, it's a pretty simple system. It's very easy to maintain as far as that goes, and it works well. So, and it's good for like 10,000 gallons. So as long as all you're worried about is things like crypto and giardia, this may be your baby. Okay, so another thing I want to talk to you about while we're out here at the creek is the Milbank bag. All right, these are made by Milbank Bag USA. They're not the same thing as just a piece of canvas sewn into the shape of a sock. They're not the same thing as your bandana or your shamag or a piece of your jeans or anything else. They are a very high thread count canvas type material that gives you a membrane to separate turbidity from the water before it goes into a container. The importance of that, again, is that a lot of those filters that are made from charcoal and even from hollow fiber, like the Sawyer, are susceptible to clogging because of debris in the water. At the same time, if you're going to boil the water, you may want all the debris out of it before you boil it so that you're not eating or drinking that debris. The Milbank bag will do that for you as well. These things don't weigh a whole lot. So if I'm using something like a Grayl, I'm going to have one of these. If I'm using something like a Pen, I'm going to have one of these. If I'm boiling water, I'm going to have one of these. So in most instances, I'm going to use this bag first, if at all possible, to get any debris out of the water that possibly could clog a filter, or I don't want to have to eat it if I'm boiling the water, or if I'm just sterilizing it with a Pen, I definitely don't want to drink it either. So I can get rid of it with this, and it doesn't weigh very much. So in case you don't remember the last video I did on this, the key to this thing is getting it wet first and then filling it to the line. And then the water filters down through here and it's machine washable. So the first thing we're going to do with this bag is we're going to get it wet. That will help open up the fiber so it can filter. If you can do this somewhere away from where you're going to collect the water, it's better, because you may stir up a lot of turbidity doing this, all right? If you have a piece of cordage in there ahead of time, that's going to make it more convenient for you. I just used this on our knock bag, so I'm going to replace it now on here. And again, this is as simple as opening it up with a large opening and going in here and collecting the water. And then hanging the bag. And you can see the flow. Okay? That's going to remove the turbidity, the mud, the junk, things like that before you filter. This is a pre-filtering device. Again, also good if you're boiling the water using a Pen to get turbidity out for sure. You can see how well that flows. When you're done, you can just wash it out in the creek. You can turn it completely inside out, wash the mud out of it, whatever, and hang it somewhere to dry. Okay, so let's talk about the Pen. There are some pros to this thing that I'm really fond of now that I've started messing with it. Okay, I've never played with one of these before, but now that I've looked at some things, I'm a fan for certain reasons. Number one, it takes care of the big four. So it's a good backup system to have. It doesn't weigh a whole lot or take up a lot of room, so it's easy to carry. It's also USB rechargeable. So if you're already carrying a brick and a phone, maybe a GPS or a spot or an inReach, all those things that are rechargeable, you're probably carrying a brick anyway, so it's easy enough to recharge. It's also fairly automatic and easy, because once you fill up a water container like we did here, all you do is remove the cap, and I'm going to turn this around so you guys can see, I hope. You drop this until the contacts touch the water, and the light comes on. Once the light comes on, you just stir it around in the water. And you wait until the light goes off, and that gives you the it's treated signal. So you got about 90 seconds you have to wait for that. I'm going to cut this film short so you're not waiting here for a minute and a half to watch this, but I'll cut back to it when it cuts off. And stirring it while you're doing it, moving it around a little bit, is a good idea. Okay, so now you see the light went off. You just pull it out. Shake the excess water off of it, put the cap on it, and you're good to go for the next time. You've taken care of those big four problems. You've taken care of the bacteria, both of the main pathogens, the Cryptosporidium and the Giardia, and you've taken care of the viruses. Done deal. Cap on, ready to rock and roll. Again, I use an Nalgene bottle so you guys can see what's going on, not because I would carry one. So now, let's talk about metal water bottles real quick. I want to show you a new thing. We talked about the way this filter, this Sawyer squeeze, screws onto the bladder and how it drains into a Nalgene. And we hold it over the Nalgene and let it drip into the Nalgene bottle. We've got a lid here that's got a vent in it so it doesn't vapor lock. That goes on our water bottle and our canteen. And this is 3D printed. We should have these in stock probably within the next couple of weeks. And you screw this filter straight into it. And now you can just hang the entire thing with the knock bag off of a tree and it will fill up. And I tested this over the weekend on a Pathfinder canteen because this lid does fit the canteen as well. And it took about 20 minutes to fill the entire canteen through this filter just by gravity. So that's a new product that we're going to have on our website pretty soon. It's an adapter for that style filter. All right. Now, the next thing we should talk about real quick, just wrapping things up, is the tabs, right? So I've got some Aqumira tabs here. I've got some Aqua tabs here. I've got some Polar Pure here. I've got some old Aqumira tabs here. And any of these will work. But again, we talked about the effectiveness of these things. So these wouldn't be something that I would have in my backup most likely, because in my area, they don't take care of everything I want to take care of. So for me, they're not important to have, but for other people, they may be exactly what you want. So it's good to talk about them. So the last thing I want to talk about is this Aqumira Frontier Pro. And I talked about this in my last video as one of the top 5 add-ons I would put in my bag, or any bag for that matter. This is just a piece of slingshot tubing that I've attached to the bottom. It comes with a harder tube than this when you buy it. And it's just got a bite valve on it here. It's good for 50 gallons. And again, it is a filter that will only filter out Cryptosporidium and Giardia. It's not going to take in bacteria. It's not going to take care of viruses. However, you can just stick this thing right into a mud puddle or any source and drink if you have to. So it's a good emergency backup device to carry. Okay, so a couple final thoughts on the SteriPen. Like I said, fairly new item to me. I like it because it's easily packable. It doesn't weigh very much. It's rechargeable, and it takes care of the top 4. However, like everything else, it's not perfect. It has inherent problems. And some of those problems, for me, are a big deal. The way this works is these 2 metal contacts have to be touching the water for this to work. If you have a smart water bottle, you ain't disinfecting your water with this. You have to have a wide mouth bottle to get this down in there. The other downside of that is it would have to be full, because you're not going to reach down inside the bottle with this and be able to get the contacts to touch and see what's going on. So you got to have a full water bottle. So unless you're collecting water and disinfecting water in something like a bush pot, where you can easily get down in there and do this stuff, it's going to cause you a problem. And even if you were collecting, say you can only collect 4 ounces of water in something, it has to be at least deep enough for your contacts to touch the water, which means your container's got to be at least that deep, no matter what. So even if you're using your cup to collect that water, you still got to get down in there, and that water's got to be a certain depth before your contacts are going to touch the water and work. So those are just a couple of drawbacks you need to think about. Not that they're not easily worked around. Like I said, you could use your cup to disinfect water. But the other thing is it only cycles for 1 liter. So it's set up to cycle automatically for 1 liter of water. Now, you can't overdo it, but understand that if you're using this for something like a canteen that's over 32 ounces, you're gonna have to cycle it twice in order to get the water clean. So 3 minutes instead of the 1.5 minutes. Those are all things you just need to understand before using a piece of equipment like this or investing your money in it if you decide that's too much of a hassle. All right, guys, I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters and the Pathfinder School. I appreciate your views. I appreciate your support. I thank you for everything you do for our school, for our family, for our business, for all of our sponsors, instructors, affiliates, and friends. And I'll be back with another video as soon as I can, guys. Thanks.